I want to jump into these things that you've learned along the way.
Can I come at this a little bit differently? Can I just talk about from having no knowledge of ministry and no background in ministry? And again, I didn't become a believer until I was a senior in high school, and I didn't come from a Christian home, and I don't have family that's in the ministry, and that's just not my story. Can I just make some observations of things that if I were to do it again, that I would want to know, because these are the things that I've learned along the way. But that's what I did. And I just wrote down a number of them and I fired them off. And that's how we ended up sitting here right now. Number one is a simple word of wisdom, which is the best advice I think I've ever received in my life. And it's served me well. And it's simply this little axiom of truth. Hey, it is never as good as you think it is, and it is never as bad as you fear it is.
Hey, welcome to Leading Simple. My name is Rusty George. Every time we do this podcast, I get a chance to share with you some great insight from friends of mine that I've learned from along the way. And every now and then, somebody comes along that drops such gold on us, it's just too much to deal with in one episode. So today is part one of my conversation with the pastor by the name of Cal Jernigan, out of the Phoenix area, Central Christian Church in Mesa, Arizona. I recently heard him at a conference talk about 15 things that he has learned the hard way over 25 years of being the senior pastor of a church over 10,000 people. It's an incredible talk, and I asked him if he would share that with us. It was so good. We're going to divide it up into two parts. So you're going to want to hear today, but make sure you subscribe to the podcast, because that will make sure that you get to hear it next week as well. And if you're only listening to us on audio, make sure you check us out on YouTube as well. Well, here is part one of my conversation with Cal Jernigan. Cal Jernigan, I think this is your first time on the podcast. I'm not sure. But man, I have been a big fan of yours for so many years, long before we ever met, because you're legendary in that you were doing youth ministry back when it was still a lost art. People weren't able to figure it out. You were one of those guys everybody looked to how to do this. You were pioneering things out in Arizona. You were following the great leader, Leroy Lawson, who has been a guest on the show, and you took over for him. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that conversation was like, because I thought that was hilarious. And then I'm going to tee you up for some life wisdom for all of our pastors. So you're a youth pastor at this church, and then what happens?
All right. Well, Rusty, first off, thank you so much for the invitation to be with you. I have off the charts respect for you and always have. So I'm very honored to be here. So basically what happened was I was a youth pastor here at Central for about a decade. But about 6 years into that, Roy was asked as the senior pastor here to also be the president of Hope International University. And so he started doing double time. He would work here and then he would work there. And then a year or two after that, I got asked if I would do the same thing, if I would work here and then teach youth ministry over there. And so I was doing that. So I had about maybe 18 years of youth ministry experience, teaching youth ministry. And I was a youth pastor, and I loved being a youth pastor. And I would have been a youth pastor all of my life. Except that one day in 1996, I was walking through the lobby of our campus here in Mesa and saw Roy, and he just got real serious. And he just looked at me and he said, "Hey, are you going to be on campus tomorrow? Meaning, are you going to be at Hope?" And I would fly over every Monday. So I said, "Yeah, I'm going to be over there." And he said, "Good. You need to see me. You need to find me." And I looked at him. I said, "Well, Roy, what's it about?" And he goes, "I don't need to tell you that. We'll talk about it tomorrow." And I had no idea, but I was quite intimidated by that, because being a youth pastor, anything any kid ever did, you're responsible for it. And I had no idea, but I didn't know of anything. So it was like, I'm going to get ambushed on something. So basically the next day I flew over, and I wish to try to describe it this way. Like I'm the kind of person, if I got something unpleasant to do, just let me get it over with. I want to get it over with. So I just decided, the first thing I do when I get over there is I'm going to go see him. Well, his office was on the 7th story of kind of a high rise that overlooked the campus. And I got on the elevator and I just had this overwhelming feeling like I'm going to see the principal. Like it brought back vivid memories of my childhood, and I'm in trouble. And I felt my heart starting to pound as I was going up the elevator. And I get off and I start walking to where his office is. And there was a little complex of like secretarial pool. And then there were vice president offices around the perimeter and then his office. And I just walked up to the lady. I had no idea who she was. I walked up to the lady and I said, "Hey, is there any chance I could get in to see Roy right now?" And she looked at me and she said, "Then you are?" And I said, "Well, my name's Cal, but he'll," and she goes, "He's expecting you. He told me that if you showed up that he would be okay to be interrupted. So let me go tell him." And I said, he like, really? He would be interrupted? So again, my nervousness is just rising. And so she goes in and tells him I'm waiting for him. And no time passed. He comes walking out with his arm around somebody, and he's, basically saying goodbye to them. And he looks at me and he goes, "Go in there, and I'll be in there in a minute." Just deadpan serious. And so I go in, and I don't know what to do. There was 3 sections to his office. There was his desk, big executive desk, big chair. There were 2 wingback chairs, and then there was a conference area. It was his office. And normally, I would think I would have walked in and just have fun and put my feet up on his desk and sat there and said, "Hey, it's about time you showed up," and just horsed around with him because he's a joker. But I didn't feel the mood, and I'm not doing that. So I decide I'm going to go in and I'm going to just sit in one of the wingback chairs, and I'll just wait for him to come in, and then we'll figure out what I'm in trouble for. And so, long story short, he comes walking in. He gets about halfway to me. He stops and he turns around and he goes back and closes the door. And everything inside me at this point is going like, "Oh no, this is like really serious." And then he came, and I was sitting in one of the wingback chairs, and he looks at me and he goes, "You need to move." And he's just serious. And I'm like, "Roy, what is up?" He goes, "You need to move because I can't hear out of that ear, and I need to hear what you're about to say to me." And every worst case scenario is going through my mind, and it becomes very obvious that this is not what I am. I'm going to get fired. Apparently, I'm going to be called on the carpet. So anyway, I get up and I move, and I look at him. And he looks at me, and he says this question to me: "So, how long did you think you were going to be the youth pastor at Central?" And I just looked at him and I go, "Roy, it seems kind of a moot point at this. What did I do?" And he goes, "Answer the question." I go, "Roy, a lot longer than apparently I'm going to be. What did I do?" And then he said to me, he goes, "We no longer want you to be our youth pastor at Central." And I go, "Roy, I get it. I don't know why, but I'm getting fired. I don't understand it. It's making no sense to me. And then he goes, "We want you now to be the senior pastor." And so what was amazing about that is I went from the worst emotion to what? Like, what? And so that's how it began. And it was nothing I aspired to. It was nothing I longed for. I didn't put my name in any hat. But he was coming to a point where he was just going to be the president of Hope and no longer be the pastor. And the board, and he had decided that I would be the guy. And so I went through a whole identity crisis. That's a whole nother story for another podcast. But that's how it was presented. So it was kind of like it was fishing, and I got hooked and I got reeled in, and it was pretty funny.
That's
when it was
amazing.
All done.
Yeah, I'm sure that he had a good laugh after all that was over with, and took you a while to recover. So you ended up being
20-some years later.
Yeah, of course. How many years have you been the senior pastor?
I just finished my 25th, so about 25 and a half, and then we'll be done on my 26th anniversary.
Okay, so you've put the transition process into play. You've picked your guy. The church is now aware. You're moving ahead. It's really been textbook and gone really, really well. But you shared a talk with a group of pastors that I was a part of a few months ago. I couldn't take notes fast enough. The only thing that gave me any kind of solace was knowing I might have a chance to get you on the podcast to share all of this. But it was such great wisdom from a guy that was about to finish up and looking back, just sharing some things you'd learned along the way. And I think this is going to be applicable for anybody, whether you're in vocational ministry or not. So I've asked you on here to share those insights, but I love how you started it off. You had some kind of North Star verses you talked about. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit of that? And then I'll just let you roll into the things that you've learned and the things that you reflect on.
Yeah, and again, I've got my notes from that talk in front of me, so if you'll allow me, I'll kind of look over here.
Yeah.
So basically what I started with, Rusty, was I said, there's just been some kind of bedrock, foundational, benchmark, kind of stay on these, keep your focus on this from the very beginning. And they've helped guide me. So Psalm 127:1, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. And the point I was making from that, and that I've tried to keep in my heart, is if God isn't in it and it's not for God, don't bother with it, because it will make no difference. And then the second one was 1 Corinthians 3:10, and down a little bit. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and somebody else is building on it, but each one should build with care, for no one can lay a foundation other than the one already laid, which is Christ Jesus. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It has been, if what it has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though as one only escaping through the flames. And then the point I made on that is, there's a lot of ways we can go about doing this, but so the first one is, if God's not in it, don't bother. But if we're not going to do it God's way, none of it's going to matter. It's not going to last. And, and again, I think there are many examples that we could talk about where we've just seen things just go up in flames.
Right.
Ministries and literally careers of pastors is going up in flames. And then the last one was Psalm 37:23, the steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way. And then I just made the point, just do whatever God tells you to do. And the reason that's meant so much to me is because, again, I've already said this, but I have had no aspirations whatsoever in my life to be the lead pastor of a church, and certainly not a church the size of Central. That was never on the radar ever. And so it's been really trying to step up and learn how to do this and make sense of it when I didn't go to school to learn this stuff. And again, I shared with you guys in my life that I had a friend that was really close, and Glenn Elliott, if you know Glenn, he was really close as a friend, and he got kind of, it was like a big brother to me. But I didn't have a pastor mentor person that, really kind of showed me the ropes. And so it's just been a journey of trying to figure it out and learn. And that's kind of that.
Well, those are such great verses for all of us to kind of base our life upon. So I want to jump into these things that you've learned along the way. And I forgot the number of them. You have 9 or 10 or something like that. But man, I'm just going to let you roll, because these are so profound. So you just talk and you just share as much as you're willing to.
Okay. Well, I would say this, Rusty. Most of the guys in the group that we were in, when they come to the end of their career, they're asked to share with the group, what are like 5 things you would do again, and what are 5 things you wouldn't do again. And we've kind of, formatted everything that way. And so when I was asked, I said, can I come at this a little bit differently? Can I just talk about, from having no knowledge of ministry and no background in ministry? And again, I didn't become a believer until I was a senior in high school, and I didn't come from a Christian home, and I don't have family that's in the ministry, and that's just not my story. Can I just make some observations of things that, if I were to do it again, that I would want to know? Because these are the things that I've learned along the way. And some of this has been shared with me. Some of this is just by discovery, by doing it. But that's what I did. And I just wrote down a number of them, and I fired them off. And that's how we ended up sitting here right now. So I have this in front of me, and I'll go through these quick. We can drill down on any of these if you want to, but let me kind of get through it. Number 1 is a simple word of wisdom, which is the best advice I think I've ever received in my life. And it's served me well. And it's simply this little axiom of truth. Hey, It is never as good as you think it is, and it is never as bad as you fear it is. And the reason that has meant so much to me is that in my 25 years plus of doing this, I have experienced unbelievable highs that have just surpassed anything I ever thought possible. And things have opened up, and I've seen things and been places and done things and better than I ever thought. And so good. And you go, man, this is going to just be absolutely fantastic. When it's good, it's just fantastic. But I've also experienced really deep lows where it just sucks the life out of you. And for me personally, which I think is a very common experience for pastors around the country, the last 4 years from COVID on. Now, again, in my life, the last year has certainly gotten easier for reasons we'll maybe talk about. But the 20, 21, 22, 23, those were just brutally difficult years. And if all I could do is gauge everything on those years, I'd be done. I'd be out. It's like this crazy. The fruit is not what it used to be, and it's really hard. So anyway, it's never as good as you think it is. And I remember when we did the story, that's when we as a church, and we were like running over, 12,000 people, and it was like fantastic. And then it wasn't. and you're like, what happened here? And it's never as good, and it's never as bad. So take solace in that.
Hey, let me interrupt this podcast for just a brief moment and tell you about our brand new book we have out called 40 Days to Easter. Starting March the 11th, we begin our 40-day journey to Easter. And spoiler alert, there's actually 42 days in there. So starting on March 10th, you can begin your journey to Easter and end on Easter Sunday itself with very short daily devotions going through the Gospel of Mark. You can pick up this book called 40 Days to Easter by Rusty George on Amazon today. Thanks so much. Back to the episode. Let me ask you about something with that real quick, just for a second. I'm just reflecting on that statement because I've heard that before, and I always thought that was really good. Do you feel like as you've gotten older, obviously COVID is its own thing, but maybe pre-COVID, that it got easier to believe that? Do you feel like that the difficulties stung a little, I don't want to say less, but the impact didn't last as long? You were able to get over it mentally quicker the older you got?
I'll fire that at me again.
Well, I'm just thinking about, the highs are really high, the lows are really low. You and I both know a great sermon on Sunday lasts about 30 minutes, okay?
On a good Sunday, 30 minutes.
On a good Sunday. And you're already thinking about the next one, or, somebody says something negative. But when something happens that's bad, it just kind of lingers with you for a while, and you can tell yourself, you know what, it's really not as bad as you think it is. It's not as bad as you think it is. Were you able to believe that quicker the older you got? Did the pain last a little?
I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you were asking. Yeah, absolutely. Because you start, at the beginning, everything is magnified to the point of you don't have the experience, you don't have the paradigm to realize it's just not that good.
Right.
And it's really easy to let your emotions get carried away either way, but it's much more fun when it's good, obviously, and it's devastating when it's bad. But you start to realize, and again, through all the years of doing it, there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, but not as good, not as bad. And again, we take joy in the good, but we fear the bad. We fear, like, oh, I guess this means nobody's coming back. Nobody's, we're dropping, in attendance or whatever. And it was a bad weekend.
Yeah.
It was spring break, or something. Put it in perspective. So I do think the years temper, just temper your understanding of that. So yes, it does definitely get easier.
Yeah.
I wish I'd have known it.
Oh,
but I had to kind of discover it.
Exactly. I just had one of those aha moments the other day where, 20 years in California, you begin to figure out, okay, the highs, the lows. May is crazy because of graduations and homecomings and everything. So nobody's at church. So you just learn to live with it. But September's great. Well, I get out here, and September wasn't great. And a pastor told me, hey, have you experienced a September slump? I said, what is that? And he said, state fair. I said, what are you talking about? That's a big thing out here. So it really is learning the culture and learning the rhythms of the year. Like you said, it's not always as bad as you think it is.
Yeah. Well, and again, I do think our minds like to go to, we get carried away with the up and we get carried away with the bad.
Yes.
So,
okay. Number two.
Number two is just simply the idea, and I don't need to spend any time on this, but I've discovered in ministry that people that are really outspoken, that are very positive, that are very quick to tell you, man, that was so good, or you're doing so good, or you're all this. People that are quick to do that are also the very same ones who are quick to leave the church, to spread their negativity. That people that have like no emotional regulator overdo it on the praise, which allows them to have the same problem on the criticism. And again, so now I've just learned over the years, when somebody's coming up and just, kind of blowing it all over you, it's just kind of like, it's not, again, it's not this good. So, and when you hear what they're saying about you behind your back, it's not that bad. So that would be right.
Take it with a grain of salt, as they say. That's good. Number three.
And again, I just wish I'd have known that, because I actually believed the good when it was first told to me, until you run the course and you realize that then you upset them and now they're saying everything the opposite.
Right. Right. It really is stunning. You can almost take their words back to them and say, wait a second, am I the same guy? That never helps.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. The third one, and this is one that has really been a defining and I think a really important principle that we discovered, or just by doing ministry. Which these are not necessarily things you learn in a classroom. These are just little things you just pick up and you go, like, wow, I wish I'd understood that. But it's this simple principle. You always pay the premium on a decision before you ever reap the dividend of that decision. And to me, this is huge. We have made decisions that have made our church. In other words, if we hadn't made that decision, our church would not be what it is today. But in the process of making that decision, we have paid a price. And, there's lots of illustrations of that I could use. Maybe the more vivid, bigger ones were when we first made a decision to go multi-site. We were just a campus in Mesa, and then we opened another campus, the journey of many churches. We lost so many people when we made that decision, and it set us back. I mean, people were like not happy, didn't like the idea, didn't buy into it, and they just stopped coming. And you go, this was a very bad decision. But the truth of the matter is, it was a very good decision. It was a very timely decision. It was a very important decision. And then after making that decision, taking the loss, a little bit later, you look back on it and you go, man, this is obviously one of the best decisions we've ever made, because we're able to do so much more than we were able to do before. And again, I didn't know that when people were just leaving unhappy. I didn't understand that all really good decisions you make will set you back before they move you forward. And I don't think intuitively we know that. We just think we're going to make a really good decision. Immediately we're going to reap the benefit from it. And the problem is, in the church, I don't think it works like that.
Right.
Why is it this way? I don't know.
Do you think it's just the change factor? People just don't like change?
I do think that's exactly what it is. And again, another idea that's kind of a parallel to this, I naively thought, and I mean naively thought, that vision, if you have vision, it is going to mobilize the masses. That vision is going to light people on fire. And man, I came in with so much vision of so many things, and I discovered vision attracts a certain kind of person, and vision repels a certain kind of person. And you want to have everybody be happy about the vision, but they're not going to be. And so again, just lessons you learn. Just brace yourself. It's a good decision, but you got to get through it. And which kind of ties into another corollary that I shared with you guys. I just did not know. I did not know when I started being a senior leader at a church. And again, this might seem incredibly naive that I didn't know this, but I'm telling you, never prepared for it, never knew, wasn't like trained to do a senior pastor. I had no idea the amount of courage that being a senior leader of a church requires. No, never heard anyone talk about it, never saw it, never realized it. But my goodness, I think about how many times And just over this computer in the next room over is my work office, and I've got a library and all the books. And I just think how many times I've sat in that office, knowing the right decision to make is this decision, whatever it is, and then realizing it's going to be a bloodbath. People are going to be really angry. We're going to lose people, but it's the right decision to make, and we need to make it. I had no idea that this was going to come down to fear against courage. And I really do believe that one of the reasons that churches get stuck is the leader just goes, I'm not going to pay that price. Mm-hmm. And churches that move forward are led by people who go, I know the price is going to be high, but we need to pay it. And they're willing. They step up and they pay that price.
Can you think of another decision that you made that you thought, this is really going to cost me? Obviously, multi-site was one of them. Over 25 years, I'm sure there were a lot. And maybe they didn't cost you as bad as you thought they would, but there was going to be a price to be paid. You used the term bloodbath. I love that one. But what was one that you made that it did cost you?
We used to have a Christian school. And what was happening was when we only had one campus, this campus I'm sitting on in Mesa, more and more of the rooms are being used by the Christian school, which literally took them out of circulation for the church. Mm-hmm. And we did some deep study on it and realized that the majority of the kids that were involved in the school, neither they nor their families had anything to do with the church, but that we were supplementing their income by providing really inexpensive childcare in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. And we realized that we either have to build more buildings at a huge expense to the church, or we just need to use the buildings that we'd already built for the purposes of the church. Mm-hmm. And so we made a decision that we were going to shut down that preschool. And it was preschool, elementary. And again, it seems so obvious now, but I had no clue the amount of vitriol that was going to come at us. And literally, it's the only time in the history of our church that I can recall parents stormed an elders meeting.
With pitchforks.
They wanted their time, and they brought all, and we sat and listened. And then, the board had to wrestle with the price. And they said, you know what, this is what we need to do. And it's interesting, too, because we have 6 core values. One of them is just how highly we value our students and our children. Mm. And people that didn't even go to our church used our core values to leverage against us, which I just find fascinating. Like, you said you cared, and, which means you should give us what we want. But we shut the school down. A lot of people were upset, kind of a media thing. And yet we needed the room. And we didn't build these buildings for a school. Mm. We built these buildings to do a church. And so we've, reappointed them for that. So that's another one. We have a courtyard outside here that used to just be granite, and just granite, which again, Arizona, if you understand granite, a lot of Arizona is granite, but nothing appealing, nothing aesthetic about it whatsoever. And we made a decision. We're going to create a very nice courtyard with fountains and date palm trees and sails and shade and grass and walls to sit on. And it really makes this place beautiful. It's really beautiful. But getting that built, there were people just going, I cannot believe you're using my tithe palm trees. And you're like, yeah, well, that's what we're doing. So again, and I remember one guy just really got in my face about it. And he said, he was really angry. And he just said what I just said. And I just said, that's fine. I said, okay, well, I'll make you a deal. We will use none of your money. But the flip side of it is, I want to promise out of you, I will never see you enjoying this courtyard. We have an agreement. And so anyway, but again, there are so many decisions that just, I just think we need to understand it's okay. You're going to go, if it's a good decision, don't just assume you're just going to jump forward. If it's a good decision, understand that it's going to cost you, and then it's going to benefit you. Mm-hmm. And if it's a good decision in the end, you're far better off than you would have ever been if you hadn't made the decision, and that it took courage that a lot of people just won't muster. And
Man, that is such a brilliant piece of wisdom. I wish I would have heard that 30 years ago, because I think for a lot of us, we just assume if it's not unanimous, if everybody doesn't love the idea, then God's not in it. So we've got to constantly be running the polls to figure out if everybody's with us. And then when they're not, then we give up on it too quick when we could have just paid the premium and eventually reap the dividend.
Yeah. Well, and then again, let me jump on a tangent. When a church votes on every decision, you are literally pitting the sharpest, most spiritually minded person in your church. You're negating their vote by the least spiritual, you give them both an equal vote. And so your best thinker got nullified by your least spiritually minded person. And then you go up until everyone's covered and everyone's neutralized. And your final decision is somewhere that nobody really thought was a good decision. And I think leaders need to lead, and leaders make the decisions, and then you pay the price and you go, look, if you can't track with this. And again, we have lost people as we've gone multi-site and changed the direction of our church. Mm-hmm. We've gained far more people than we've lost, and that it was a good decision. It was just a very hard decision. Mm-hmm. But people who don't want to go with you don't want to go with you.
And 99 times out of 100, they don't leave the faith; they just leave the church, and they end up at a different church.
Yeah, absolutely. Until they get upset.
Yeah, then they come back. Okay, so number 4 kind of ties into what you were just saying in regards to the board.
The board, the thing that I would say about what I always try to tell young pastors is if you don't have your board with you on wherever you're planning to go, you're never going to get there. Mm-hmm. You're only going to go as far, and your ministry is only going to be as good as the relationship you have with your board. Mm-hmm. And wherever you plan on taking the church, if you don't take your board there first, if your board doesn't see the reason why you're doing what you're doing or believe in the cause that you're trying to go up against, you're going to find yourself in a horrible, horrible place. I really don't think we prepare pastors. We don't train pastors in board relationships very well. And, mm-hmm. I would say some of the, not my only best friends, but some of my very best friends in the church are the people on that board, not that they're my friends and they get on the board, but when they get on that board, I work hard to try to build a deep relationship with them where they know me, they know my heart, they know what I'm up against and and what I'm about and all those kind of things. And I just see too many churches just go, you know what, I'm going to try my hardest to work around the board. I'm going to try to nullify the board. I'm going to try to limit the influence of the board. And I just think, again, I've learned the opposite. And I always tell people our secret sauce as a church is the relationship I share with the board because the trust level is so high. Mm-hmm. I don't surprise them. They know if they got surprised, it's because I'm also surprised. I didn't see it coming. I didn't know that was in the works. I didn't know it was happening, whatever. But they always track. But what happens is, and I've seen this happen, I saw this happen over the George Floyd. We weathered George Floyd because I had prepared the board. We had talked at length about racial issues. I'd taken the board down south. We had done some things with racial reconciliation with the board prior to the George Floyd episode. And so I could just stand in confidence in the pulpit and lead our church through the trauma of George Floyd because I knew the board was with me. And so often what happens is, the board gets surprised by something the pastor says, or the pastor hears something the board said. And so it's just not going to go any better for you as a leader than it is with the relationship you have with your board. So instead of dreading it and avoiding them and putting it off, I would just go dive into it, go straight into it, and be as real and genuine as you can be. And that's going to define. Mm-hmm. And if there's something wrong with the board, you got to face it. You got to deal with it. And Anyway.
That's good. Okay. I love this next one, number 5.
But again, I'm assuming you're working on the same list I'm working on.
I am.
Number 5 is, and this is sobering. This just breaks my heart, and it sounds so cynical, and I know it, but I've discovered after 26 years of trying, and that's not even true because it's been all 40 some years of my life. It's more 40 some years of my ministry. You can't fix foolish. You just can't fix foolish. I have tried so many times to come around somebody who's done something really stupid in the ministry and tried to help them get back on their feet and try to get them reestablished and tried and lent every bit of support I could lend to them, because I love a great redemption story, and it motivates me and it encourages me, and I will believe it's the church and it's the way it ought to be. But I'll tell you what, I've just discovered through the years that when people do foolish things, I do not have the capacity to get them beyond that. And I've wasted a lot of time, and I have had a lot of setbacks because I didn't understand that. And again, I got too many examples. But here's what I can tell you of my attempts to help fix foolish. I am probably batting 5% or 10% at best. It just you can't fix foolish. Foolish gets done by people who don't see the consequences, and I can't explain consequences to people who can't visualize it before they experience it, and they've just got to go through it, and then they don't learn. So just an observation. At this stage, I don't jump into often, believing that somehow I have the ability to turn around a story of somebody that thing has gone south.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay. Next one.
There's no point in dwelling on things you have no control over. And I think in the ministry, we think we have control over everything, and we simply don't. And one of the illustrations I used, and Ashley Woolridge was in the room at the time. Ashley Woolridge pastors Christ Church of the Valley here in the Phoenix area, an incredibly successful mega church. And I don't know I'm making a number up. I think they have 17 campuses around the Phoenix area. I'm not sure that's the right number. A lot would be adequate to call it. And, when I first started here all these years ago, there was a Christian church in Mesa, and there was one in Phoenix, and there was one in Peoria, and that was called Christ Church of the Valley. There was one in Chandler called Chandler, and it was like regional. And you just had to understand that, you don't cross over. And then when the multi-site model kicked in, man, it just has gotten crazy. And it's gotten so crazy. And the reference I made is, one of these campuses ended up temporarily about a quarter mile from another one of our campuses, not intentionally, not to do harm, but you just go, I can't control that. I wish they weren't doing that. I talked to Ashley, and he was very kind, kind of making it work, but it just is a different world. We spend too much time worrying about what we cannot change. Yeah. And experience has just taught me, just let it go. And so, and again, there's, other illustrations of that, but it's just difficult. Another thing for me personally, I think I might've shared with you guys, was I was very, very, I've had two mentors in my life that I feel really have shaped me and helped me. One is Roy Lawson, the other one is Bill Hybels. And the story of Bill and the way that all ended just was devastating, but I couldn't do a thing about it. So just, understand there's things you can affect and things that you have no effect on whatsoever. And just come to peace with that. Then the sooner you do, the easier, and you're going to sleep better, and you're going to live a happier life.
I told you, great stuff. You're going to want to be here for part 2, because it gets even better. So that's my conversation with Cal Jernigan. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so you get next week's episode just dropped in immediately. Check us out on YouTube and share this with a friend. And as always, keep it simple.